Okay. Hi, I'm Lilia Gutnik. This is Dominic Marion, and we're going to be talking about how AI and machine learning get real. Well, more specifically, we're going to talk about Back to the Future, just for a little. Back to the Future gave us a lot of visions of possible technologies. Some of them were pretty cool. Some of them maybe overly complicated. I'm thinking flying cars, hoverboards, rehydrating microwave pizza. Any nods? Yeah? Excuse me. But my favorite vision of the future wasn't any of these. It didn't possibly explode. It didn't taste disgusting. It didn't risk people's lives. No, my favorite vision of the future from Back to the Future solved an actual problem. It solved a problem I have, something I assume many of you have had if you were ever younger and are now older. All right, everyone. What I'm talking about are power laces. More specifically, self-lacing sneakers. Now, what I mean here is adaptive clothing, curated specifically to you. Jackets that tailor themselves, that dry when they're wet, things that shorten exactly to your measurements, shoes that always fit. Has anybody in here ever thought, man, I wish everything I owned fit me perfectly through my life? I'm talking about a powerful curated experience for something that you rely on every day. That's my type of vision of the future. We at PagerDuty are inspired by that to use relevant technology and solve real problems. You are using the best of breed in your stacks, using multiple technologies to solve problems. So when we use things like machine learning or natural language processing or anything that falls in the bucket of AI, we're choosing the best possible tools that deliver value to you. So today, I'm going to talk about how your feedback shaped our roadmap. How we're delivering features that will hopefully solve some of your biggest problems and deliver real value. What value? Well, we've asked and you've answered. This is just one inspiring quote of many we had. I would love to be able to roll up alerts. If there's a network outage, we should be able to roll up to a single alert rather than getting paged literally hundreds of times. Has that happened to anybody here in this room? Fantastic. Oh, I wish you were sitting closer, then you'd be part of this beta. No two people's experiences with PagerDuty are quite the same. For some, it's a hub of critical current events. For others, PagerDuty is a perspective on the last week, the last month, and beyond. But to many of us, it's a barbershop quartet gently serenading us awake because the server's on fire. On fire. Every aspect of incident response can be improved with data. Data creates awareness with metrics. Mean time to resolve tells you if your team is solving problems faster or slower. Data gives context with visualizations. Infrastructure health can assure you that your services are not, in fact, all blowing up at the same time, or that they are, if they are. And the post-mortem chat log tells a story. Subsequent annotations and answers here talk about questions like who, what, and when for different incidents. Part of your major incident response, down to just the smallest page to your system, will always be annotated with data. The data-focused projects we'll talk about today are inspired by responders in those first moments of triage. All right, I know this question was asked earlier, but just want to get a layout here. How many people are actually on call right now? Okay, fantastic. How many people have ever been on call? For the two of you who didn't raise your hand, I'm glad you're here. I'm not sure if you'll empathize, but we'll work with it. So for the rest of you, this is that moment when you know something is wrong, but you don't quite know what that problem is yet. You're trying to gather information to help you make a decision and take action. You're triaging, and it's painful. Downtime is stressful and expensive. Well, yeah. Go back. Today, you're going to see some data-driven capabilities that bring focus, context, and relief into that triage state. With these new data-focused features, will help you give perspective and give guidance to your team. And I encourage you to think about some of these features in your own life and how they could help you and your team maybe get perspective on your infrastructure over time, maybe onboard new team members, maybe reduce some stress, add context. How these capabilities can impact those of you who are responders, those of you who are managers. So let's start with another quote. Often the things that we monitor go down in groups, which creates multiple incidents, which causes the same team to get multiple text messages, emails, phone calls, etc. Has anybody here had their phone drain of battery during a major incident? 2 people. You're in my beta right now. So if that sounds familiar to you, or maybe it doesn't, we'll talk about some other situations that this could cause by. If you have maybe redundant tools that do monitoring for you, so when one thing goes down, you get a lot of notifications about it. Yeah? Have you heard of list blindness, when you look at your incident list and there are just so many different incidents, like all in the same minute, 5 minutes, or an hour, you can't possibly keep track. Maybe then for each of those, that one incident you're looking at right now doesn't quite have enough context because there are 57,000 other ones that just appeared at the same time. That can happen in something called an alert storm or an alert flood. And maybe something's going on in your infrastructure that's causing a problem and a lot of things are reacting. Now, it's not always true that that'll happen just because something's gone wrong. Your infrastructure is like a garden that needs to be constantly tended, always watered, which means that your alerting will constantly change. And though for some of you, your alerting tuning is really mature. You have exactly the alerts that you want. You're tuned exactly to the thresholds, right? Of course. But maybe there's somebody else at your team, not your team, but maybe somebody else in your organization. Maybe their tuning isn't quite up to par. Maybe they could get a little help in those in-between times. So it's not always about the problem times. It's about the times in between. That's why the first project that some of you saw this morning is about automatic alert grouping, where we automatically group all of the alerts that are related to one problem into one incident. This means that all of the various monitoring tools on all these different integrations coming in on a service are now grouped into one incident. So now you have full context. The beginning and end of that incident are captured with all of the alerts therein, instead of having to be distributed across dozens or hundreds. Now there's 2 flavors of automatic alert grouping. The strongest correlating factor to determine if 2 alerts are related on one service is time. In our research, we found that most people will associate really closely occurring events together and say that that's part of one incident. They'll resolve them at the same time or write notes that show that they're related. Manually have to resolve them together. So now we've afforded for you that option. You know your services well, and you know that behavior. You can now select a series of time buckets, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, 24 hours, and then collect all of the alerts on that service into incidents in those sort of time buckets. It's predictable and conservative. Now the next one, starting to get a little fancier. What if it's not always true that those time buckets are the same? What if there are other facets of those alerts that will distinguish whether or not they should be part of an incident? Would you like me to stand somewhere else? Okay, then we'll just deal with it. In that case, we have intelligent alert grouping. And that's where we start to use some of that more advanced tool set in machine learning that will adapt the behavior of your services and your environment. Even if that same service starts to take changes based on the new alerts that you've introduced or new aspects, new monitoring tools, the machine learning model will retrain and learn from that behavior. As new team members develop new patterns, it will be able to window and make decisions on how to group those alerts into incidents. So even if a flood of alerts comes in at the same time, it will distinguish those that are related to each other and group those into the appropriate incidents. Self-tying laces. What does this mean? This means that instead of one alert turning into one incident, turning into one phone call, 10 alerts, 10 incidents, 10 phone calls, now you have a bunch of alerts all related. They turn into one phone call, and then they collect those alerts over time. This means that now you know about the problem. You can watch the problem as it continues to grow, evolve, resolve. You're notified about it. You're kept aware of it. Everything is held in one place, and you can actually focus on that problem. This means that you can see the whole board. Now, if you were playing chess and you only looked at one chess piece, it's unlikely you would win. Right? Similarly with incident response, if you're only looking at one alert at a time, it's unlikely you'll have the full picture of that incident. More importantly, you stop getting hit in the face quite so often when things start to go south. We like to think about this sort of whole board as an incident signature, a reference that you'll be able to look at later. So what is an incident signature? Imagine your world, and PagerDuty incidents are rich contextual objects. They have multiple alerts nested inside of them, and the start and end time actually reflect the start and end time of the thing that went wrong. This means that you can basically describe the problem with more adjectives. Let's say that you told me to try to find your car in this parking lot, and you had one adjective. You said, it's silver. I would have a hard time finding that car. One adjective, one alert, one incident. Now let's say that you added a few more adjectives. You grouped more alerts into that incident. It's silver. It seats two. Its doors go vertical. Has a flux capacitor. It goes back in time. It's a DeLorean. We found it. I think I'd have a lot easier time finding that car. If you have a DeLorean, I will find it, for sure. So that's the benefit of being able to group alerts into incidents and be able to describe a situation with more adjectives. Keep focused in that time of triage. Our next project is also inspired by triage. Here's a request. Information and context around an alert and its history could be valuable for on-call engineers when they're orienting around a problem and deciding what to do. So we're back in triage. It's late at night. We're panicking. Have you ever seen this before? Has this ever happened? If you did do this before, what did you do last time? What did anyone do last time? Was this customer impacting? Did this get bad? How long did this last? This is the kind of information you would like to have when you're woken up at 2 in the morning, or really any time, 2 in the afternoon. It doesn't matter. This is valuable, helpful information. Luckily for you, there are patterns to your incidents. Things repeat themselves, either identically or with slight variations. A bad deploy causes a very similar ripple effect on downstream services, or one of several databases fail that causes further dependent services to go down. Our incident history is riddled with the scars we've already earned. So why don't we learn from some of that history? That's why I want to present to you similar incidents. With similar incidents, you're in that triage state, you can look at an incident and you will see using natural language processing that we've matched to previous historical incidents you've already gone through. People on your team have already resolved. And then you'll be able to compare and learn from that additional information. How long did it take? Who worked on this last? How bad was it? I'm going to be able to click in there and read that postmortem, read any notes about it, see what didn't work, but more importantly, see what did. This additional context helps you make better decisions faster. If you can find any of this information, you're going to be more self-sufficient. The underlying technology in here, again, solves a real problem. But you don't have to take my word for it. I'm happy to introduce you Dominic Marion from NBC News Digital. His team has been participating in some early beta programs using both of these projects, and he's here to talk to you about his experience.
Thanks, Lilia. Hi, so first of all, I'm really excited to be here and share kind of our journey of using PagerDuty with News Digital. But first, a little bit of background on who I am and how I came to be here. I was born and raised on the beautiful island of Guam. It's about 3 hours southeast of Japan. And I was a child of the 80s. I grew up with a lot of tech, Super NES. My first computer was an Apple IIc. My first handheld device was a Game Boy. So tech was always, I played a ton of games with video games, and so tech was always part of my life. And I felt like that was kind of a natural transition for me after high school to then pursue a degree in tech. So I relocated myself from Guam out to Seattle, Washington, and attended Seattle University, got my degree in e-commerce information systems, and shortly after that, I managed to land a job with the MSN Service Operations Center at Microsoft. The SOC is very much similar to a traditional NOC. However, what they focused on primarily was on application support. Again, as with any SOC or NOC, they were 24/7. You had folks, when I first started, I worked that kind of that on-call life. I worked in graveyards, overnights, day shift, swing shift, you name it. Similar experiences that most of the responders today have had in their experience. So I know that on-call life. And then, so the MSN SOC supported like MSN.com, MSNBC.com, Hotmail, and Messenger. And that's kind of where I gained my roots as a kind of understanding what the incident management and felt like. And kind of at the core of it was me getting to that point at which I can discover a passion in my career. So I decided to pursue, shortly after working at the SOC, I decided to pursue a degree, or pursue working at MSNBC.com, which was another property of MSN. And at that point, it's been 12 years and a divestiture between Microsoft and NBC in that half span of time, in which I've supported news digital websites. And all these news digital websites have been MSNBC.com, NBCnews.com, Breaking News, NBC Sports, CNBC, and a whole plethora of other smaller sites that we ended up supporting. You know, at NBCnews.com, I ended up loving it so much with the incident management part of it that I ended up managing the team that I came in to be as an analyst. And that team now, we're staffed very lean. We have a six team that is staffed 24/7, and we're in downtown Seattle, and we currently support just NBCnews.com, MSNBC, and Today.com. And those are three major news brand websites under the News Digital site. So, you know, in the world of broadcast, we support two types of customers. The first of which is our editorial staff. And these guys are responsible for content curation and content creation. And so this basically means that if there's a breaking news event anywhere in the world, these guys are going to be the first to kind of build that story out and publish it out to our website. Which leads me to the second group of folks that we support, our end users. And these are the individuals that come to our site and rely upon our ability to break that news in a timely fashion, to always have a site that's highly available and highly responsive. So that's kind of in the world of broadcasting, you know, that's who we support as a customer base.
So I'm sure there are a lot of people in here who also have content creators and content consumers. How do you feel like broadcast as an industry is special or different or unique?
Yeah, broadcasts as an industry, news is a commodity. So, you know, you can go to any news website or any social site and get the news that you're expecting. But because it's a commodity, it's equally important for us to be able to break that news in a timely manner and have our sites highly available and responsive. Our users expect that, and we deliver as best as we can for that. And so that's the difference. Like, if we can't be highly responsive or highly available, or if there's constant issues in our production environment and we're not able to respond to those incidents in a timely manner, that audience base, we'll lose it pretty quickly.
You know, we were talking about breaking news, and I remember where I was when I found out about Barack Obama being elected or Michael Jackson dying. But where were you?
So with major news events, I've been, I guess, fortunate enough to work. I was working during that time, so those were the times in my career in which it was very rewarding, and it felt great to be at that front line. So, you know, while you can anticipate traffic events, such as major planned events, such as an election, a presidential election, or the Olympics, for example, you can't always anticipate breaking news events, and breaking news events that are unplanned. You know, Michael Jackson unfortunately dying. That's something that's just not planned. It's important that we prepare as best as we can from an incident management perspective to address those issues if they do arise that kind of impact any of our customers' ability to either do their jobs or come to our site and rely upon that data to be there.
One when I first met you, you described the behind the scenes at NBC News Digital as having to manage chaos. So as you first started to manage that chaos with PagerDuty, what were some of your early goals?
You know, I think our first, when we first wanted to assess PagerDuty, it was very simple. It was like, we wanted to solve for simple logistical problems. The way our teams, our operations team managed our on-call schedule was through Outlook. Simple as it may, just created a lot of logistical challenges in terms of people updating it, going on vacation, and et cetera. The other logistical challenge that we had to solve for was that my team, my Tier 1 operations support team, shout out to them, they're essentially, we managed our information off, or our incidents off of Outlook itself. And so we had that list form, but it was very generic in nature, and it wasn't easy for reporting. There wasn't a lot of dynamic abilities for us to kind of track that data. And so over time, you know, I think ultimately what we discovered is that we needed a really effective, an effective incident management platform. And this is sort of, you know, the first stages of why we pursued PagerDuty.
Thank you. Happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So you started to get away from that Outlook calendar. Your team started to mature. What were some of the next goals that you faced?
Well, I think after cutting back on all those logistical challenges, we now were able to get smart about, you know, how we managed our workflow. And, you know, PagerDuty actually gives us a way that allows I mean, as a manager, I like the ability to kind of see the forest from the trees, and also in any particular event, be able to dive into a specific incident and say, hey, do you need help with this? Do I need to provide air cover from a management perspective, or do I need to just step away and let you do your job? And as I see that progress, that's something that was valuable for us. And so, not just from a management perspective, but my team now has a more effective and more clean way of looking at our incidents. You know, we went from Outlook, kind of that list form, to now a list form in PagerDuty, but with way more metadata behind it.
You once described that a lot of the transition was from having to ask questions on a conference call to making your engineers find it and be more self-sufficient.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, for anyone who's ever been on a call at odd hours of the day, or even during a normal business day, I think one of the challenges that we all experience is that engineers or managers or analysts would jump on the call, and the first question anyone would ask is, when did this happen, or when did this first start? Who's all involved? Have we notified executives? Who, you know, like all those basic questions that could potentially be handled at either a Tier 1 level or the first responder level, now is at the everyone has access to that data, and you can see that all through PagerDuty.
So when I met you, you had gotten really passionate about adding a lot of data into PagerDuty so that people could have this optics, the forest from the trees or the tree itself. But you were also starting to describe a pain you'd called alert fatigue.
Correct.
So that's when you and I first started talking about being part of the automatic alert grouping beta. What were the experiences you had there?
Yeah, you know, I think our evolution with PagerDuty was very natural, and it was quick too. We got to a point where now that we have our data in PagerDuty, when we got those alert storms, or you know, a server that had duplicate alerts coming from multiple monitoring platforms would generate a ton of noise, and at that point we weren't very the data, all that we could see is volume, and it wasn't very effective. So that's when we wanted to explore a better way of looking at our data, and at that, you know, you could in essence we went from a one-to-one relationship, a system alert would fire, an event would be recorded into PagerDuty, and if we had multiple events of this, or multiple alerts of the same kind of event, it was very difficult to kind of sift through that data. So that's why it created more of an alert fatigue. And oftentimes what ends up happening is that we would just dedicate one analyst to go in and actually start to just manually resolve those tickets. And it wasn't very effective.
So since then, you started using automatic alert grouping, and I think your count is up to 42 services?
That's correct. We have 42 services configured for automatic alert grouping. And since then, we've actually saved thousands of alerts being generated into our queue, which is a lot of time for my analysts to not be focused on manually resolving them. So before alert grouping, and a flood would hit, what we focused on was that each analyst would now we can, instead of manually closing out these tickets on a one-to-one basis, I can now focus my analyst's attention on, like, hey, let's get the additional resources that need to be involved to fix a problem, and we can be more effective about where we move our resources.
And with such a lean team, that's really important to you.
Correct.
And then the next project that you started to work with was similar incidents, which I think also had a pretty good impact on your team.
Correct. Similar incidents is actually a really good value add to my team, and the reason why it's essential is that we operate very lean, and I have staff analysts working in the overnight capacity in a solo environment. So you're the one person with a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and oftentimes you're perhaps the newest on the team. So with similar incidents, what that actually provides us is that not just provides that analyst with a new optic into discovering if whether or not this issue has happened before, who has been involved in fixing the issue, how long have these issues actually take to resolve, and it gives them a lot more context into, hey, all these incidents for example, we've had to escalate to a web engineer, and now they can provide more context and say, hey, looking at similar incidents, we see that this has happened 3 times over the course of a week, and you've worked on this issue, so help us out. Help us resolve this.
That's incredible. So part of similar incidents gives some comfort to that person on the graveyard shift. It also affords for more communication across the different teams. And I think my favorite way you've ever described this was that extra person
That's right.
on your team. It's like you have a whole other person who's working that graveyard shift.
That's right.
Which I love to hear. So given the experiences you've had with these 2 projects, what are some of your visions for how you want to use PagerDuty in the future, how you want to continue to evolve?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is that now that there's the alert grouping in place, the similar incidents in place, and I hope at some point we can get to a more early develop some type of early warning system for our ops teams and for the front line.
So when there's smoke, there's probably fire.
Exactly.
Got it.
And so at some time be able to have predictive analysis of your data and say, hey, over time we've noticed that if you continue these certain sorts of signatures that you talk about, Lilia, are indicative of a potential problem that has happened in the past, and guess what? It's right about to start. So, or we're detecting that it's getting that way. So perhaps get to a more proactive state and do what was done to fix the original problem, but at a more earlier time.
Thank you, Dominic. So what does this mean for you? How can you get involved? Well, time-based alert grouping will be available shortly after Summit. I encourage you all to be aware of it and find it, configure it, try it out on your services. I welcome your feedback. I am the only Lilia at PagerDuty I know. I'm confirmed by Twitter that I'm the only super Lilia on there. If you're interested in being part of the similar incidents beta or the beta for the machine learning-based intelligent alert grouping, please let me know. Might not be today I respond. I'll be available in the UX Labs booth as well after around 3 o'clock, showing some new future stuff around voice prototyping and what that could possibly look like. And right after this, I'm in the band. So if you want to be in that beta, I want to see you in the front row, I want to see you singing along, and then I will remember you because I have eyes like a hawk. Thank you so much. for being available, for making time. I know it's feeding late into your lunch hour. I think we are just at time. So like I said, I'll answer questions. Dominic and I will be available in the UX Labs area. It's got fake grass. It's a delight. I'll see you at 3. I'll see you at the band. I'll see you at lunch. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.